Good morning. Today's video is on steps for finding slope from a graph. All right, we're going to go through how to do it. We're going to do a couple of samples together. All right, first off, we want to find any 2 points on the line, but not really just any two. We really want to find our points that are easiest to count spaces with. Now, to me, that means we want spaces, our spots that are at corners. You can see these red dots that are on this line here that I've marked at corners. Now, I could also choose spots in between. So, for example, I could choose this spot right here. But when I count right from that spot, how many spaces would I be counting to the next line? Like half a space, a third of a space, a fourth of a space? So we want to avoid that. We want to avoid having to count in fractionals. We don't want a little quarter of a space up and 3/4 of a space over. That's just confusing. So if we pick and choose wisely, we won't have to really do much fraction work. Even though our answer will end up looking like a fraction, we're not really doing much fraction work if we keep, again, our dots to the corner spots. So that's the first thing. Find any 2 points. Now we want to count out our rise, which is our up and down count, and our run, which is our left and right count. Now if you're counting up, you'd be getting a positive, just like this number line here that goes up, those numbers are all positive. Now, if you happen to count down, like this list of numbers, you'd get negative, just like those. If you count to the right, you get positive answers, just like there. And if you count to the left, you'll get negatives. So we want to count, but we want to make sure we're counting in the right direction. And in the end, we already know a way to double check our work on that part anyway. We'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so let's count. So let's pick any 2 points. So I'm going to pick this point here, and I'm going to go up and over. And I'm going to count my rise and my run. So in this problem, my rise, it means how far did I count up? Well, I went up 2 spaces from that red dot to where I turned to go to the other red dot. So my rise would be 2. Then my run. My run is how far I moved from left to right. I went up 2 spaces, and then I went to the right 3 spaces. Well, the right is positive. All right, now if I did that again, I could do any 2 points. Let me have these 2 points over here. Well, my rise should also be up 2 spaces, and my run should also be 2 spaces. Or these 2, or these 2, or these 2. It shouldn't have mattered which one I pick. Every single one of them should have the same rise 2 and run 3. Now, step 3, write it as a fraction, rise over run. So just put a fraction bar in between them. And then last but not least, reduce the fraction. So that fraction right there, 2/3, is already reduced, so I don't need to do anything else. That is my answer. So what happens, though, if I had picked some other things? Because somebody's always going to say, well, what happens if I picked this one? Oops. If I picked this one and I went down and then over, what happens if I did that? Well, let's check that one out. All right, if you went down and then over, same 2 dots I picked before. So this time, my rise would end up being down 2, which was a negative. And my run would end up being left 3 spaces, also a negative. But what is a negative divided by a negative? Right back to a positive. All right. I also told you there was a way to kind of double check your work on these. Well, if you look at this line itself, what direction is it going from left to right? So you're over here on the left-hand side and you're going to walk towards the right. You're going uphill, which means that the slope has to be positive. That's why we did that first. That was our way of checking to make sure we've counted and got our numbers the right positive and negative signs. I already knew this one's positive. It's going up from left to right. That was easy. All right, now someone else is going to also ask, well, what happens if I chose 2 points that were far away from each other? Like, what if I chose this point here and this one all the way over here? What about my rise and run for that? Well, my rise, if I check it, it would be up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's up 6 spaces for my rise. Ups are positive. And then my run, that's the bottom of the fraction, That's right and left. That's over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 spaces to the right. Well, that's where step 4 here comes in. Reduce. I could reduce that fraction. I could divide each of those numbers by 3, and guess what I'd get back to? Yep, back to 2/3. That slope is the pattern in this graph for how much the graph is going up compared to how much it's going over. Right? The larger that fraction, the larger the number, the steeper the line is. The closer that line or that fraction gets to 0, the more flat the line is. So again, these are very important details for, especially a truck driver or somebody who works like that. All right, so let's do some examples. All right, first off, step 1, let's find 2 dots. Well, these ones already have dots marked. How nice. Secondly, let's count rise and run, and it doesn't matter which dot you start from. I already know, based on the way that this one looks, that my final answer is going to be negative, because that's a negative slope. But what number does it get? So that's where we have to count. And again, it does not matter which dot you count from. I started at the bottom. I'm going to count up. I'm going to count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It looks like 7 spaces up. Ups are positive. Now my run, how many did I count over? That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I went to the left, so that's 9 spaces. Now 7 over 9 doesn't reduce, but we don't normally write plus signs. So I'm going to get rid of that plus sign. And there's my answer. 7 over negative 9. Well, I already knew it was going to be negative by the way it looked. Next one. I can tell by the way this one looks that it's going to be positive. I'm just going to count my numbers. So that's a rise of 1, 2, 3, 4. So my rise is 4. And a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then this one does reduce. I can divide both numbers by 2. So the final answer would be 2/3, dividing each by 2. By the way, your calculator does know how to reduce fractions. If you don't know how to do that, that is exactly what the Zoom meeting is for. It's not for you to sit there and do nothing. It's for you to get on there and ask questions about stuff you don't know how to do. Like if you don't know how to reduce fractions on a calculator. All right, next one, number 7. All right, again, 2 dots are already done. We're just going to do our count. This time I went down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces, so down 5 spaces. And then I went to the right 1 space. And that also reduces. Negative 5 divided by 1 makes the whole number negative 5. And yes, whole numbers are fine if they actually are divided by 1 or if they work out perfectly. All right, next one. If I'm looking at this one, hopefully you remember from yesterday, this is one that we call undefined, and we're going to see why we call it that in a second. All right, so I got my 2 dots right here and here. If I count my rise was up 3, and my run was over 0. And that's what makes something undefined. If you type in 3 divided by 0 in a calculator, it's going to tell you that it can't do that. There's an error or it's undefined, because we are not allowed to do that. All right, let's try 2 more. And what makes these last 2 different is that there are no dots. We're going to have to find them ourselves. So when that happens, what you have to do is just look. Scan with your eyes and look for a place where the line crosses at a corner. And you need to find 2 of them. There's more. I can find one here also, and it looks like here also. But I just need 2, not all 4. Any 2 will work. Now I'm going to count my rise and run. This time my rise was down 2, and my run was to the right 3. That's already reduced. Got it. Double check. Yes, that was negative. My answer is negative. That should match. Same with this last one. This should be negative. So it doesn't matter what I get in the end. I should have a negative sign in there. All right, so I'm going to look for a place where the graph crosses corners. I see one that looks like right about there and one right about there. I'm going to count my rise and run. My rise would be down 1, 2, 3 spaces. My run is to the right 1 space, and that one does reduce. Anything divided by 1 is itself. We don't write divide by 1. It's unnecessary. All right, this is what your work looks like today, but this is an extremely important lesson, and I hope you understand what's happening. If you don't understand, please join me on the Zoom meeting and ask some questions today. All right, good luck.